Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a source that makes a pretty bold claim that Donald Trump has made a massive strategic shift. The argument, laid out by Sean Spicer, is that we're seeing a whole new playbook. This is Trump 2.0, and it's supposedly less about policy and all about winning the culture.
So, how does the source actually build this case? Well, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to unpack the core theory that this entire argument rests on. Then, we'll see how the source frames Trump's first term as a kind of missed opportunity. After that, we'll dive straight into this new cultural play and the evidence the source presents for it. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the big takeaway.
All right, so to really get what the source is arguing here, we have to start with one big foundational idea. It's the concept that frames this entire analysis of political strategy.
The whole argument is built on this one quote, which the source attributes to Andrew Breitbart: "Politics is downstream from culture." Now, the idea is actually pretty simple, but it has huge implications. It means that what happens in our movies, our music, on social media, basically the whole cultural stream, is what ultimately shapes our political world. So if you want to change politics, this theory says you can't just focus on policy. You got to start with culture.
Okay, so keeping that downstream theory in mind, how does the source look back at Trump's first term? Well, it's framed not so much as a failure of policy, but more as a massive missed opportunity, a huge strategic oversight.
According to the source, that first term was laser-focused on policy. You know, getting a team together, trying to implement a political agenda, the standard stuff. But while the administration was deep in the weeds of traditional politics, the analysis claims they let the entire cultural battlefield just fall by the wayside.
And that brings us to the source's main point. A major strategic pivot has supposedly happened. This is what they're calling Trump 2.0, an approach that is defined by a direct, deliberate, head-on engagement with culture.
This slide really lays out the central contrast the source is making. Over on the left, you've got Trump 1.0, which the source basically calls the problem, a policy-first strategy that let others control the cultural narrative. And on the right, you have Trump 2.0, presented as the solution, a strategy that takes the culture war head-on.
So, what proof does the source actually offer for this big cultural pivot? Well, it points to a few really interesting examples, pulling from everywhere, from political talk shows to, believe it or not, the world of pop culture.
First up, the source brings in commentary from Bill Maher. It uses this quote to basically say, look, even critics are noticing something different is happening. The argument is that Trump is pulling together this really unusual coalition, supposedly making gains with groups like Latino and black male voters. And the implication here is that this isn't just a shift in politics, it's a shift in culture.
And it's not just commentary. The source also points to some polling data to back this up. The argument here is that when you look at what people vote on, the big kitchen table issues like the economy, crime, and immigration, the polling they cite suggests that Republicans are seen as having a better plan. The source says this is a sign that a culturally focused message is starting to connect.
But the argument doesn't just stick to polling and political analysis. To really drive home this claim of a cultural shift, the source takes a turn into a pretty unexpected place: the world of entertainment.
Now, this is a moment the source really leans into. Pop superstar Nicki Minaj appearing at a conservative youth conference. Her words of encouragement to the crowd are presented as some powerful evidence of this Trump 2.0 strategy in action. It's meant to show that major cultural figures are now engaging with the conservative movement in a totally new way.
The source isn't done yet. It gives us another example of this shift, this time pointing to a change in how the president is directly participating in a major American cultural institution. So, the source makes a really direct comparison here. In his first term, Trump didn't attend the Kennedy Center honors. But in this supposed new phase, he was not only there, he was apparently acting as the Master of Ceremonies. And this quote, even though it was delivered as a joke, is used to highlight a totally different, much more hands-on approach to a major cultural event.
Okay, so after laying out the theory and all this evidence, what's the big picture? What does the source think this cultural strategy all adds up to?
So let's just boil it all down. The source's main arguments are pretty clear. First, the idea that culture is absolutely critical for political wins. Second, that Trump 2.0 is a very deliberate strategy to engage with culture directly. This is framed as the single biggest difference from the first term. And the ultimate goal? To push back against a cultural landscape that the source claims has been totally dominated by the left.
And that's our breakdown of the argument. The source is basically presenting this cultural pivot as a total game changer, and it really leaves you with a final question to think about. If politics truly is downstream from culture, What could a strategy that prioritizes it mean for the future of political campaigns?